Species. Unite.
One after another, citizens came up and they just hammered that council with additional concerns. One of the guys who lives, his place is 500 feet from there. He's like, what do you think this is going to do to me, to my family? How dare you expose me and my family in this community? None of y'all live around there. How could you not have brought this to a vote? A woman got up and started talking about the research modernization deal. Another woman got up and started talking about land values. A man got up and started talking about malaria. I mean, it's just one after another. They came up, and I don't know. I could have just started levitating because I was so buoyed by what this community was doing, and it has not stopped since then.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Novogratz. This is Species Unite. We'd like to thank Lush for sponsoring today's episode. Lush advocates for people, animals, and the planet. Through their ethically sourced ingredients and their grants program, they give back locally and around the world. There's a small town in Georgia called Bainbridge. It's got 15,000 residents. And those 15,000 residents were recently duped by their city and county officials. What happened was some people came in and proposed a deal to build a $400 million monkey breeding facility. And city and county officials not only agreed to do it, but they gave them almost $60 million in handouts, a 20-year tax abatement, and hundreds of acres of public land. And when the residents of Bainbridge found out, they reached out to PETA's senior science advisor, Dr. Lisa Jones-Engel. This conversation is with Dr. Lisa Jones-Engel to talk about what's happening in Bainbridge. Thank you very much for doing this because this thing is nuts. Actually, this morning I was telling, because I'm at my parents' house, and I was telling them, who don't really know a lot about any of this kind of stuff. And the first thing my mom said was like, what? We are still testing on primates? And I was like, it's like thousands and thousands of them. But people don't know.
People don't know. But boy, when you tell them, they become activated in a way that is just, it's like making my heart explode. How the outrage that people have been feeling, and also the level of education that they are digging for information. They are desperate to understand the entire scope of this issue. So yeah, people don't know, but when you tell them, they act.
You've been on the podcast before, and we had an awesome episode. It was live and it was incredible. So for anyone who doesn't know who Lisa is, please go back and listen to the first one, because we're not going to go into all of that, but we are going to at least say who you are, what you do, and how you got here.
I am Lisa Jones-Engel. I am PETA's Senior Science Advisor for Primate Experimentation. I'm coming into my 5th year with PETA as their advisor. Prior to that, I spent 30 plus years in the primate biomedical industry, starting out as a laboratory animal technician in a chimp facility in upstate New York, working at national primate research centers. Unfortunately, seeing the really dark side of the importation industry over in Asia. My science was looking at how infectious diseases move between humans and monkeys, both where the monkeys naturally occur, particularly in Asia, but also in the laboratory, and to identify, what the animals are bringing in with them when they're imported, what they become infected with once they're in the research facilities, and how those infections really can undermine the scientific integrity and certainly represent a public health risk. And so I now take all of that, all of those years, and I use it with PETA to help PETA understand and to get the message out and to bring about change.
I was doing a lot of reading this morning and this week on you, and everyone says, the expert, senior science advisor, expert. Like, you're not like just the expert. You're like the expert of the experts. You spent 30 years, like, this stuff better than pretty much anyone.
Yeah, I don't think I really realized until a few years into PETA. Truly, I've touched every point of the pipeline. I think honestly, what's making me effective is when people, you're right. There are thousands of monkeys that are being imported. There are tens of thousands of monkeys that are being used in biomedical experimentation. And when people, they hear monkey, or they might even hear the term long-tailed macaque, or in a paper, somebody might write about, we used 5 adult female long-tailed macaques who weighed between 5 and 7 kilos. When I read that, or if I read it in the media, I know exactly what that adult female looks like. I've had her in my hands. I've felt her weight. I've run my hand along her tail. I've taken blood from her. I've looked into her eyes. And so this is very, very personal for me, because it's every animal that's spoken of, I know them. I may not know that specific animal, but I know their brother, their sister, their aunt, their uncle, their cousins. They're all related, and my degree of separation from the macaques is pretty short.
There's so many things that connect to what we're about to talk about, because long-tailed macaques, if you're like reading about them or kind of in the know of what's happening with them, it's not just the horror show of this facility that is possibly going to be built in Bainbridge, Georgia, but it's endangered species list, it's wild macaques. They're really in the news in this realm at the moment. And all of it, I think, could, and you will tell us better than me, but all of this could really be the end of research on them, or the beginning of the end.
I think you're right. And the irony is that 10 years ago, no one was talking about the long-tailed macaque. And that was kind of the secret weapon of the industry. Here's a monkey who, in some ways, they're incredibly adaptable and successful animal. They are the perfect primate, which allowed them to be very visible in certain places, particularly when they at the interface with humans. They can hang out with us in towns and in temples and on the edges of gardens, because they're called an edge species. That's one of their defining characteristics. They like to be on the edges and to take advantage of that edge, which makes them very visible, which also kind of annoys people. These are monkeys. If they see a mango or, a finger of bananas in a back garden and no one's around, they're going to go in and take that. That's a very reasonable activity. If somebody's walking down the street and they're dangling a little plastic bag and they're not paying attention, that monkey is going to go up and snag that bag. That's good, adaptable monkey behavior, but it really pisses a lot of people off. And so for years, if people were saying anything about the long-tailed macaques, they were saying, "Oh, they're a nuisance. Oh, there are too many of them. Oh, they're annoying me." And the industry, they took advantage of that. You see it in the way that they talk about these species. They're weeds. They're introduced. Nobody likes them. We're doing a favor for these governments, when in fact, the long-tailed macaque is a critical player. They are a keystone species in these environments. These monkeys are the heroes that we need in the 21st century, because they are showing us how to respond to change, how to respond to climate change, to environmental change, to how to respond to people changing. This monkey can do it, but not if this industry is allowed to continue to just hoover up every single monkey that they can find.
Let's talk about what's happening in Georgia. Will you give the background and the lay of the land?
Bainbridge, Georgia, rural Georgia. It's kind of maybe 50 miles north of the panhandle of Florida. Typical little town. It's got the Flint River that runs through it. About 15,000 people there. A diverse community. In mid-2023, the officials in Bainbridge were approached by this company called Safer Human Medicines, who came to them and said, "Hey, we want to put a monkey facility in your town. Give us the best possible package. make us want to come to your town. And, the presentation was slick. It was thick on glossy images and hyperbole and very, very thin on data and reality. But, this, again, small town, always looking for jobs, wanting to kind of build themselves up. The company, Safe for Human Medicine, said, but you got to sign a non-disclosure agreement first. You can't tell anyone what we're doing until this is done. So the city council officials, the county commissioners, the development authority, school superintendent, the tax assessor, they all got together and man, they swallowed this pitch whole. They gave them $58 million in tax abatements. Basically, for the first 10 years, this company wouldn't have to pay any taxes. They gave them, 200 acres of land worth $2 million for $10. They said, we'll put in the wastewater treatment. We'll run the fiber optic. We'll make sure that the substation power plant is there. We will expedite all your permits. Oh, and by the way, we'll make it so you can get a $300 million bond to help with all of this. All this is done in secret. No citizen outside of these officials in Bainbridge had any idea this was happening until early December. And we know all this because we got all the public records. We FOIA'd for the public records. And we have all this. We have the email trails. And I mean, this stuff is gross. This is really gross.
I had no idea it was that late, that it was just December that the town found out.
So we found out because a citizen reached out to us and said, we just saw on TV that a giant monkey facility is coming into our town. We heard you helped the folks out in Brazoria County, Texas. Could you give us a hand? Coming off the heels of Brazoria, Texas, where another company had gone in, tried to put in a big monkey farm. The locals called us there, and we went in, and that farm is everything now is certainly it's on pause. We think it's done. Come back to that later. But so we followed in some ways the same plays. I sat down and put together letters to every one of the officials saying, Safe for Human Medicines forgot to mention X, Y, and Z, and A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. And I sent it to them. This was right before the holidays. And I saw that they all opened them, they all read them, but I didn't hear a peep. And then we posted those letters on one of the Bainbridge Facebook groups. And it just exploded from there, Elizabeth. The citizens were like, what?
So these people had no idea what was coming.
They had no idea what was coming. And were they mad? They are mad. They are activated. They are organized. They are energized. You have 15,000 people who have basically banded together and said, absolutely not. They're furious at their elected officials. They are so annoyed, and I think annoyed is they use other words, which are probably too colorful for this podcast, about how condescending Safe for Human Medicine has been towards them. The phrases there are like, who do you think, how do you think we're stupid? Do you think that we don't understand, that we don't do our research? We don't read the papers. We don't read the media. We know what you're bringing in. We know what 30,000 monkeys will do to the environment. We know the public health risks that these animals represent. We know what it's going to do to our property values. We know what it could mean to the Flint River, what it could mean to our tourism. And these folks they are out. They are doing everything to stop it.
Will you take that apart a little bit on actually what 30,000 monkeys will do to Bainbridge, Georgia?
Sure. So the proposed facility, again, it's 30,000. They put in a 20-year kind of schedule. In the first few years, we'd have a few thousand. This is a very important point. They're saying that this is strictly a breeding facility. That what they're going to do is they're going to import monkeys from somewhere, Asia, Mauritius. They haven't made that clear. They're going to import the breeding stock, and they're going to breed baby monkeys. They're going to grow those baby monkeys up to a size, and then they're going to sell them to their clients. Now, there's a basic biology fact that these guys apparently don't understand. And these guys should, because here's the thing about Safe for Human Medicines. Safe for Human Medicine is made up of three main players. And these three guys are all, quote unquote, retired from either Charles River Laboratories or Innovative and Envigo, which are the biggest players in the monkey importation business. Here's the thing, the leadership of Safer Human Medicines, and just think about what they're calling themselves, Safer Human Medicines, and they want to use monkeys. They want to use imported monkeys. The leadership of this is, I think notorious is the best way to describe them. David Jost is the president, and he's a retired executive VP from Charles River. He was actually at Charles River when they were being sued by shareholders for basically a huge stock drop because Charles River got subpoenaed by the DOJ for their monkey importation practices. And during when Charles River actually had those shipments of monkeys who were seized because they couldn't prove that they were not wild caught. Jim Harkness. Wow. Your listeners may know Jim Harkness because he's associated with the Envigo Beagle.
Oh, God.
I don't even know what to call it. It's more than a mess. He was the executive in charge of animal research models at that Envigo and breeding facility in Virginia. He has been going around in Bainbridge saying, oh, yeah, that was a big misunderstanding. We could have just killed all those dogs, but no, I wanted to try to get them sent out for adoption. No, Jim Harkness and Envigo did their best to try to sell off those dogs. It was the DOJ that had to step in and say, the violations, the hideousness of what you're doing in this facility, what you've done to these dogs, you get nothing from that.
And for people who don't remember, that was 4,000 beagles.
4,000 beagles. And then the third person is a guy named Kurt Dörfler, also retired as an executive director at Charles River Labs. He retired very recently in 2023. It was during his tenure that Fish and Wildlife denied those more than 1,000 monkeys clearance because they couldn't prove that they were not wild caught. These guys, all of them, part of the industry, deep into the industry, and all of a sudden they've all retired and they've gotten together and said, hey, let's set up our own company. Now, Safer Human Medicine does not exist anywhere but on paper. There's no building, and yet these guys are such smooth talkers, and or the Bainbridge officials were so willing to be led that they came in with nothing. They had nothing in their pockets, Safer Human Medicines. They got these officials to give them $58 million in tax abatements and to sign off on a $300 million bond. I got to kind of admire them for that.
Wow.
But the Bainbridge folks, the Bainbridge citizens, have been taking them apart. So they want to bring in, Safer Human Medicines wants to come in, establish a 30,000 strong breeding facility. They'd have to bring in the breeding stock. They'd have to get the girls pregnant, 6 months till they deliver. Then they have to wait another 2 years for those infants to actually grow up to be of an age that they can sell them, because even in the monkey business, they generally don't sell baby monkeys. Some people do, but generally not so much. So that's a minimum of 2.5 years. If you started today, if somehow you had these girls here. This business model that they are proposing is garbage. Because you know what's going to happen? So we are in early 2024. The monkey industry is going to be done in a couple of years, 2026, 2027, because every single thing is stacking up against them. Charles River, the company, last year said in fiscal year 2023, they reduced their monkey use by 25%. Merck is reducing their monkey use. The research modernization deal was passed in 2022. The pharmacy industry is incredibly quickly pivoting towards non-animal methods. Why? Well, because one, using animals to try to predict how medicines and treatments are going to work in humans just doesn't work. Two, using monkeys, these animals are going for about $60,000 a piece right now. So if your study requires you to use a half dozen monkeys, that's $360,000 right there. Financially, it makes no sense, particularly if you can use a non-animal method that costs a tiny fraction of that and get your data. The Endangered Species Act is coming at these folks. These long-tailed macaques will be added to the Endangered Species Act. It's going to take a while. I give them that. But when they're added to the Endangered Species Act, the amount of regulations that these companies would face in order to use these animals will become so onerous as to just make it not worthwhile.
Will you explain that for a second? Because is that what happened with chimps? Is that how that went down with no more testing on chimps? It was the Endangered
Exactly.
Species Act. And how does that actually work? Because you could still test, but it was just so many regulations and that stopped it?
Exactly. So
Okay.
an animal being added to an endangered species list doesn't end all usage of that animal, but it requires any usage to undergo a level of scrutiny that is, these companies don't like scrutiny. Researchers don't like scrutiny, and they don't like to wait. The Endangered Species Act would also require, if you're going to be taking, and they call a use is kind of the term they use is a take. If you're going to be taking animals, whether they're captive bred or wild caught, then you actually have to basically commit a lot of money to the conservation of those animals in the wild, because
Ah.
an Endangered Species Act is to protect the species in situ where they are. So it simply becomes financially and logistically unappealing. And these, particularly the pharma companies, they're not dumb. They want to get their drugs to market. And so if using monkeys is now going to become so incredibly difficult and expensive for them, and they have alternatives, they're going to pursue and push and fund and move with those alternatives, not with these monkeys.
So why build this facility in the first place then? What's their incentive?
Oh, I think it's just a quick buck. I think, it's as much as I would like this industry to be done today, done yesterday, I got a couple more years where I'm going to have to keep fighting it. And in a couple of years, think about it, if they are bringing in the average number of monkeys on a shipment coming into the US is between, 500 and 700 animals. If ultimately you can sell those animals for $60,000 a piece, let's say 500 monkeys times 60,000, that's 30 million right there. One plane load of monkeys could ultimately be worth $30 million. So that's why they're doing it. They know they're not going to be around in 20 years. They know they're actually not going to build out, all 51 buildings that they're proposing. They know they're not going to be a breeding facility. They're going to be a pass-through facility. They're going to try to, get monkeys from wherever they can. They're going to come in, they're going to go through some quarantine. They've been very opaque about who's going to be doing their quarantine. And then they're going to, have them there for a little bit, and they're going to sell them to the highest bidder.
These people have already been caught, at least the Charles River people have already been caught bringing in wild caught monkeys, claiming they were captive bred. Now, Lisa and I both think a monkey's a monkey. We love monkeys. But when you're talking about diseases and what's legal, right? They've been caught bringing in wild caught. So all of a sudden, they're not going to be like legitimate and doing things by the book because they have this new facility in Georgia, right?
Exactly. All these guys are dirty. They're all dirty. They're all caught up in an industry that you don't even have to scratch the surface. You just have to walk into the room and start sniffing, and you know that this is a dirty business. These folks are just and it's because there's so much money involved in all of this, Elizabeth. It's just when you have a price tag like that
Sure.
on an animal's back, people don't care. Ethics don't care. Morality goes out the window. Public safety, public health goes out the window. Scientific integrity goes out the window. And you have guys like this who all they care about is how quickly can I get my hands on some monkeys and turn around and sell them. And Bainbridge officials were a really easy target.
They just came in and wooed them.
Wooed them. And I'm sorry, these officials I'm not cutting them any slack. They didn't do their homework. All you have to do is throw in the name, Harkness into a Google engine, throw in Charles River into a Google engine, throw in monkey importation into Google. And you know what? First things you're going to start seeing is disease risk. Monkeys coming into this country infected with things like tuberculosis and Campylobacter and Shigella and Yersinia, malaria. Just in December, while all this was going down, the CDC released a report saying that monkeys imported from Asia arrived carrying a strain of tuberculosis that we've never seen in this country in animals before, a novel strain of TB. And earlier in the year, we saw a report with monkeys coming in from Mauritius who were infected with tuberculosis, who cleared CDC quarantine, who got shipped to facilities around the country. Some of them landed in Michigan. Their latent TB kind of erupted. They broke with TB, and several of the staff in that facility were exposed and referred for treatment. This triggered a reportable disease investigation in Michigan, again, directly tied to exposure to imported monkeys. And these Safer Human Medicines have said again and again, oh, no, all of our monkeys are clean coming in. They'll all be clean. We don't use monkeys if they're dirty. If we used monkeys who weren't healthy, it wouldn't be good for the science. Well, you know what? Their own publications coming out of the pharma industry are saying, eek, it seems that we're getting more and more monkeys in who have these unintended infections, and we need to be aware of these because this is a problem for our science.
The citizens of Bainbridge, so now they become aware of this in December. I was reading some people live like within 1,200 feet of this proposed facility, right? I mean, their kids are going to be playing right next to this monkey facility.
Monkey poo and monkey goo. I went down on, what was it, like January 11th, January 12th? I've forgotten the dates, actually, because I wanted to go and address the city council. I arrived into town. On Facebook, I let some folks know that I was coming in. I said I'd be staying at a hotel beforehand if anybody wanted to meet. You know, at 1 o'clock that day, a bunch of media stations show up at this tiny little hotel, the Quality Inn. About a dozen citizens show up, and they're like, "We want information." So we had a kind of a roundtable discussion that afternoon, and then that evening, the city council was meeting. City council, you know, like most small towns, normally nobody's ever there. People were overflowing outside. Hundreds of people showed up. The room was packed. Literally, people were overflowing out the doors. Public comment began at the start of the meeting. So I stood up and gave my comment. I knew it was supposed to be 5 minutes. Actually, I had 6 minutes of comment. And I got to about 5 minutes, and the mayor said, "All right, you're done." And I said, "May I request one additional minute," which is a reasonable thing to do in a situation like that. The mayor said, "No." And then all of a sudden from the back of the room, you hear people saying, "She can have mine." "No, she can have my time." And the mayor's like, "No, I want to hear from the citizens of Bainbridge." So I turned around and I walked back and sat down. And actually, I will share this. People were standing up clapping. And I was so touched. I was so insanely touched and buoyed. You know, this community just, because, I mean, this is a PETA representative showing up in the Deep South.
No, it's incredible. It's incredible.
And I was just, I'm a little, I still get a little teary about it.
It's emotional.
It has the hair on my arm still standing up. One after another, citizens stood up. And actually the mayor said, "Don't be repeating anything that's already been said. You know, if you have new comment to make, fine, come up. But we don't need to hear the same stuff over and over again." One after another, citizens came up and they just hammered that council with additional concerns. You know, one of the guys who lives, his place is 500 feet from there. He's like, "What do you think this is going to do to me, to my family? You know, how dare you expose me and my family in this community? None of y'all live around there. How could you not have brought this to a vote?" A woman got up and started talking about the research modernization deal. Another woman got up and started talking about land values. Another woman got up and started talking about, or a man got up and started talking about malaria. I mean, it's just one after another. They came up, and I don't know. I could have just like started levitating because I was so buoyed by what this community was doing, and it has not stopped since then.
Well, I'm sure on some level the whole town felt duped, right? Like that the city council, the people in charge hid this from them, but also kind tried to like sneak it in there, right? Things that are going to actually physically hurt them, hurt their home value, hurt their children, put them at total risk. And thinking, oh, everyone's going to be fine with it.
Yes. And that's where the citizens and the council at that meeting and in, media prior to that, they doubled down. They're like, decision's made. It's done. Can't be undone. There's nothing we can do about it. It's done. Get over it. And this community was like, no, we're not getting over it. And they have just been riding these officials. They ride, thousands of emails have been sent. PETA helped with some of those, kind of directing people where to send those emails, without a doubt. A small community again, everyone is talking. Everyone is rallied around. They started a Facebook page, within a couple of days. It started with like 20 people. There are now close to 7,000 members on this Facebook page who have just kind of a lot. And this is a way for them to get information, to share information, to say, hey, I overheard Councilman X when he was sitting in the brewery talking about blah, blah, blah. And, and it's next thing you know, it's up there on the Facebook page. It's just amazing that this community they are going to do everything that they can to make this not happen. And it's working. It's absolutely working.
And did they learn, did someone in this town know about what happened in Texas? Is that what happened? Will you talk about what happened in Texas?
So in Texas, and this was back in September of last year, literally someone called the PETA hotline. And this was a rancher, hunter, shrimper, a multi-generational Texas man calling the PETA hotline and saying, I need help. And he got passed to me because it was about monkeys. And, I spoke to Jason. He said, Charles River has come in. He's bought 500 acres right next to my property. And they just came to town. They said that they're planning to put a monkey facility there. Can you help us? Because nobody else is answering our calls. And he had tried to call Fish and Wildlife. He had tried to speak to his county commissioners and county officials, and they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. It's private land. You can do whatever. They can do whatever they want. I went down. So I did say we first started, collecting public records requests, started making calls, went down, addressed the county commissioners at a public forum, met with the landowners, met with the county commissioners and the district attorneys and the mayors, face to face, and did the same thing that we ultimately did here in Bainbridge, which was to explain, this is what you were signing up for. If you let this, at that, we learned that Charles River was proposing a facility that would have 43,200 monkeys in it. I mean, the scope, the sheer scope of these facilities, the size of these, there's nothing like this in North America. There's nothing like this outside of Asia, probably outside of China. The facility that the land that Charles River bought in Brazoria County, Texas, is a freaking wetland. I mean, truly, it's wetlands. So, and there's nothing more efficient at transmitting pathogens than water. So these monkeys will be shedding these pathogens because they're diseased, they're distressed. And when they are diseased and distressed and caught up in this system, this industry, they do shed these pathogens. It's not the monkey's fault. It's the industry's fault. It's what they're doing to them. They'll shed them. Insects and birds and wildlife will be attracted to the monkey feces and the monkey food that's out in the cages. They'll come in, and the little raccoon paws and the little bird feet will step in these things, and they'll get exposed, and they'll act like fomites and vectors, and they'll transmit it. The mosquitoes, and Texas has got some good mosquitoes, almost as good as Georgia, will come in and feed on the monkeys, and then fly a mile or 3 miles, having fed on the monkeys, maybe picked up some of the malarial parasites in the monkey's blood, and then they'll go and they could then bite a person. The mycobacteria, the tuberculosis, could be shed in the feces and the saliva of these monkeys. Right next to this 500-acre plot of land that Charles River wanted to put this facility on, you got John Stern running cows on one side. You got Jason Roberts running cows on another side. You got the Koenig brothers running cows. They're right next to this facility. And this water that will flow through, this TB and this Campylobacter and Shigella could flow through. Then these cows, the calves will get sold to market. They'll get loaded in trucks and they'll truck out of Brazoria County and they'll go to who knows where, infected with tuberculosis. And Texas is a TB-free state. The Texas Cattlemen's Association does not like the idea of any monkeys coming in and spreading TB to their livelihoods. So the Charles River came down and they met with the county officials. And they said, "No, it'll be okay. It'll be good for you." And the county officials were armed with the information this time. And they said, "What about the disease? What about the ecological damage? What about the public health risks? What about where you're sourcing these monkeys?" Charles River, again, just gave some offhand pat answers. And then somebody said, "Well, this area floods. You're in a floodplain." And the Charles River officials were like, "Huh. We didn't realize that. Maybe we need to rethink." And so basically no one's heard from Charles River for a while.
So it's definitely at least stalled at the moment, if not stopped.
It's stalled. And one of the things that we're doing with other officials in Texas is making sure that Charles River doesn't try to pivot and go someplace else. Because now we have awareness on our side. This is the other part I didn't mention about Brazoria. The county commissioners in Brazoria and in the neighboring counties, city councils have all come together and passed resolutions saying, "We do not want you and your monkeys in our county."
That's brilliant.
And it's brilliant. It's beautiful, Elizabeth. It's like a revolution has come about. And this industry has never, ever faced this type of opposition.
And so, what makes it even more brilliant, because this is all happening in like the last year, right? And now the Georgia thing, which it's a totally different facility, the Georgia one.
Correct.
But now people know where to go, which is
people knew where to go.
Hysterical that it's PETA. Of course it is, but it's still very funny.
It is very funny. And it's who would have thought Texas ranchers, Georgian hunters would be reaching out. And, and people have been very frank about that. They're like, "You know what? We certainly never thought we'd be sitting around the table with PETA and having these conversations with PETA. This is not what we thought PETA was." I had a very funny exchange with one of the commissioners. I met with him in Bainbridge face to face, and I laid out everything for him. You could see he was getting a little bushy, but he was like, we got a problem here. And at one point he said, "Well, I just want you to know, there are folks here who don't like PETA, what would you say about our chicken farms and our hog farms?" And I would say, one, I'm PETA's primate advisor. So I can advise about issues with primates. He said, "But, what about, avian influenza and these other things?" I'm like, "Well, think about it. If you had to go through and wipe out an entire chicken farms, which was happening because of avian influenza, that could be restocked. Those facilities are restocked fairly quickly because chickens lay eggs and chickens come to maturity within a few weeks. A monkey, bringing in disease, or if something wipes out that entire facility that you've just agreed to give $58 million and a $300 million bond, what you've just given to them, you can't rebuild that. Monkeys take a long time to reproduce and to come of age." And you could still see he was puppy. He's like, "Well, I'm still telling you after this conversation, I'm going to go out and I'm going to have a fried chicken sandwich. What do you think of that?" And I smiled and I said, "Well, you might as well have a side of monkey shit with it too, because that's what you are bringing into this town." So I think, the whole PETA being in these places, and some we certainly are, and I think Safer Human Medicine is saying, you can't trust PETA. You let them in on this monkey stuff, they're going to come for your hunting licenses next, and and no, we are there. We are focusing on this industry, which is trying to cram down the throats of these folks a monkey facility that is dangerous and deadly and already obsolete.
It's incredible. And hopefully this just keeps passing on, right? So everywhere another one tries to come, now there's a protocol right? Like, call PETA, call Lisa, but have her come in and work with you. No, but nobody wants any of this coming to their town.
Exactly.
I mean, unfortunately, it's the same shit with chicken farms and pig farms in terms of what it's doing to people's, the environment directly around them and how it's affecting health and land and water and everything else. But at least with the monkey farms, it's a whole new world of terrible things.
It is exponentially worse, I
Yeah.
think, for
Yeah.
public health risks and for the environmental contamination.
Right.
This.
Yeah.
I mean, these monkeys are coming in with a bacteria called Burkholderia pseudomallei, which is so dangerous and can kill so quickly that the U.S. classifies it as a Tier 1 select agent, basically a bioterrorism weapon. And these monkeys are arriving infected with this.
Wow.
And there was a paper that came out from the CDC as authors in late 2022, which said, oh gosh, a bunch of monkeys came from Cambodia. We caught one of them in quarantine, but actually, we didn't catch the others, and they went on to other facilities. And then the CDC had to send out, letters to public health veterinarians and stakeholders around the nation saying, if you're getting monkeys from Asia, you need to be aware of these infectious disease risks. You need to be aware of this pathogen, a pathogen that they can shed into the environment, which can then contaminate an environment, a pathogen which is really hard to detect, which commercial assays are not good at detecting, a pathogen which causes disease, which looks like so many other kind of diseases that you actually have to really dig. You have to want to identify this in order to know it's there. And Safer Human Medicines has the audacity, the temerity, I can't even come up with another good word, to basically say, all of our monkeys coming in are clean, healthy, they represent no infectious disease risk, when everyone knows that they do.
What are next steps in Georgia? The town is definitely not up for this. But now how does the town stop it?
Next steps. Well, one of the first steps took place about 2 weeks ago when the county commissioners made a public statement that actually they had violated, I think it was the Open Meetings Act, because they failed to post publicly that when they held their meeting on December 11th, the meeting where they voted to approve the bond and approve these abatements. So the county commissioner said, so any actions that we took that day are not legal. The county commissioners are meeting again next Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. I'm going to be there. They put me on the agenda this time. They've given me 15 minutes to give a PowerPoint presentation on this. But the county commissioners have already said very publicly they are voting against this monkey facility. They have heard the word of the people. They are voting against it. The city council and the development authority, they're still playing games. They came out last week and said, oh gosh, turns out that even though we think this is a really good deal, turns out you all, talking about citizens, don't really like it. So we're gonna try to make this stop. But the problem is that bond, that $300 million bond, had already been approved in the court, had been kind of sealed or I don't know what the legal term is, on January 2nd. So that means that you can't just undo it. So about a week or so ago, citizens in Bainbridge filed a legal motion to oppose the bond. The DA for Georgia has filed an appeal against this. We just learned a couple of days ago that the Georgia Environmental Protection Division Department sent a notice of violation to the Development Authority saying, you cleared all this land and you didn't have the necessary permits in place. I think citizens are looking at a bunch of different legal challenges to this project. The hope is that the city also finds that maybe they didn't conduct their meetings appropriately and that what they voted on December 11th isn't legal, and that they'll be able to back, say, and have to revote, and they will listen to the word of the people, which is they don't want this. Every single possible challenge from every avenue is being put forth. This company, the writing is on the wall. The writing is on every single wall and every single table and every single stop sign in Bainbridge. Stop the monkey farm. They don't want it. I don't. So, it's not over yet. I wish it was over. I could use a break, a solid 5-6 months of the PETA protocol to stop the monkey farms. I'm a little tired, but
Yes.
it's working, Elizabeth. It's the actions of these folks on the ground is just, it makes me tingle.
It's beautiful. It's incredible that the town all got together too and is fighting this. Congratulations so far. And
Thank
hopefully
you.
I'll congratulate you and Bainbridge very soon.
I sincerely hope so. Charles River, when they met with officials in Brazoria, Texas, they said, I think they literally said this, and like, what do you mean you don't want us to be here? They seemed surprised that the residents in Brazoria didn't want them as neighbors. Savory Human Medicine, they shouldn't have been surprised.
No.
They should recognize that the error of using monkeys is done.
And let's hope that these two towns now will be just like precedent for any other place, in this country that they try and do this.
I think it will be. That's one of the things about Bainbridge was that their story has gone worldwide.
Yeah.
People in Japan, Australia, Europe, South America, everyone was reading this story about this. So yeah, everyone knows. So I guess I got to formalize that PETA protocol soon.
Yes, I think so. Well, Lisa, thank you. Thank you for this, and thank you for today. And it's always really incredible to talk to you.
It is so much my pleasure. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Take care.
To learn more about this proposed monkey breeding facility and to learn more about Lisa Jones-Engel, go to our website, speciesunite.com. We will have links to everything. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Species Unite. If you have a spare moment and could do us a favor, please subscribe, rate, review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people find the show. If you would like to support the podcast, we would greatly appreciate it. Go to our website, speciesunite.com, and click donate. I'd like to thank everyone at Species Unite, including Gary Knutson, Caitlin Pierce, Amy Jones, Paul Healy, Santina Polke, Sam Kosel, and Anna Kalner, who wrote and performed today's music. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.